The nameless narrator has committed his crime, but the real madness begins as he steps into a parish where logic unravels like a loose thread. Glenn O'Brien's the third policeman twists deeper into absurdity. Tonight, chapters 4 through 6 introduce the policemen and their peculiar obsessions. Welcome back to a tale where bicycles hold the secrets of the universe. Our narrator, haunted by De Selby's mad philosophies, finds himself at a police station that's a puzzle wrapped in nonsense. The sergeants await with inventions and riddles that defy reason. Of all the many striking statements made by De Selby, I do not think that any of them can rival his assertion that a journey is a hallucination. The phrase may be found in the country album Cheek by Jowl with the well-known treatise on tent suits, those egregious canvas garments which he designed as a substitute alike for the hated houses and ordinary clothing. His theory, in so far as I can understand it, seems to discount the testimony of human experience, and is at variance with everything I have learned myself on many a country walk. Human existence to Selby is defined as a succession of static experiences, each indefinitely brief, a conception which he is thought to have arrived at from examining some old cinematographic films which have belonged probably to his nephew. From this premise, he discounts reality or truth of any progression or serialism in life, denies that time can pass as such in die-accepted sense, and attributes to hallucinations the commonly experienced sensation of progression, as, for instance, in journeying from one place to another or even living. If one is resting at A, he explains, and desires to rest in a distant place B, one can only do so by resting for infinitely brief intervals in innumerable intermediate places. Thus, there is no difference essentially between what happens when one is resting at A before the start of the journey and what happens when one is en route, i.e., resting in one or the other intermediate places. He treats of these intermediate places in a lengthy footnote. They are not, he warns us, to be taken as arbitrarily determined points on the A-B axis so many inches or feet apart. They are rather to be regarded as points infinitely near each other, yet sufficiently far apart to admit of the insertion between them of the series of other intermediate places, between each of which must be imagined a chain of other resting places, not of course strictly adjacent, but arranged so as to admit the application of this principle indefinitely. The illusion of progression he attributes to the inability of the human brain, as at present developed, to appreciate the reality of these separate rests, preferring to group many millions of them together and calling the result motion, an entirely indefensible and impossible procedure, since even two separate positions cannot obtain simultaneously of the same body. Thus, motion is also an illusion. He mentions that almost any photograph is conclusive proof of his teachings. Whatever about the soundness of De Sulby's theories, there is ample evidence that they were honestly held, and thus several attempts were made to put them into practice. During his stay in England, he happened at one time to be living in Bath, and found it necessary to go from there to Folkestone on pressing business. His method of doing so was far from conventional. Instead of going to the railway station and inquiring about trains, he shut himself up in a room in his lodgings with a supply of picture postcards of the areas which he would be traversing on such a journey, together with an elaborate arrangement of clocks and barometric instruments and a device for regulating the gas light in conformity with the changing light of the outside day. What happened in the room or how precisely the clocks or other machines were manipulated will never be known. It seems that he emerged after a lapse of 7 hours convinced that he was in Folkestone, and possibly that he had evolved a formula for travellers which would be extremely distasteful to railway and shipping companies. There is no record of this extent of his disillusionment in which he found himself, still in the familiar surroundings of Bath, but one authority relates that he claimed without turning a hair to have been in Folkestone and back again. Reference is made to a man, unnamed, declared to have actually seen the savant coming out of Folkestone Bank on the material date. Like most of De Sulby's theories, the ultimate outcome is inconclusive. It is a curious enigma that so great a mind would question the most obvious realities and object even to things scientifically demonstrated, such as the sequence of day and night, while believing absolutely in his own fantastic explanations of the same phenomena. On my own journey to the police barracks, I need only say that it was no hallucination. The heat of the sun played incontrovertibly on every inch of me, the hardness of the road was uncompromising, and the country changed slowly but surely as I made my way through it. To the left was a broad bogland, scarred with dark cuttings and strewn with rugged clumps of bushes, white streaks of boulder, and here and there a distant half-house half hiding in an assembly of little trees. Far beyond was another region sheltering in the haze, purple and mysterious. The right-hand side was a greener country with a small turbulent river occupying the road at a respectful distance, and on the other side of it hills of rocky pasture stretching away in the distance up and down. Tiny sheep could be discerned near the sky far away, and crooked lanes ran hither and thither. There were no sign whatsoever of human life. It was still early morning, perhaps. If I had not lost my American gold watch, it would be possible for me to tell the time. You have no American gold watch. Something strange had happened to me suddenly. The road before me was turning gently to the left, and as I approached the bend my heart began to behave irregularly, and an unaccountable excitement took complete possession of me. There was nothing to see, and no change of any kind had come upon the scene to explain what was taking place within me. I continued walking with wild eyes. As I came round the bend, an extraordinary spectacle was presented to me. About 100 yards away on the left-hand side was a house which astonished me. It looked as if it were painted like an advertisement on a board on the roadside, and indeed very poorly painted. It looked completely false and unconvincing. It did not seem to have any depth or breadth, and looked as if it would not deceive a child. That was not in itself sufficient to surprise me, because I had seen pictures and notices by the roadside before. What bewildered me was the sure knowledge, deeply rooted in my mind, that this was the house I was searching for, and that there were people inside it. I had no doubt at all that it was the barracks of the policeman. I had never seen with my eyes ever in my life before anything so unnatural and appalling, and my gaze faltered about the thing uncomprehendingly, as if at least one of the customary dimensions was missing, leaving no meaning in the remainder. The appearance of the house was a great surprise I had encountered, since I had seen the old man in the chair and felt afraid of it. I kept on walking, but walked more slowly. As I approached, the house seemed to change its appearance. At first, it did nothing to reconcile itself with the shape of an ordinary house, but it became uncertain in outline, like a thing glimpsed under a ruffled water. Then it became clear again, and I saw that it began to have some back to it, some small space for rooms behind the frontage. I gathered this from the fact that it seemed to see the front and back of the building simultaneous from my position approaching what should have been the side. As there was no side that I could see, as I thought the house must be triangular with its apex pointing towards me, but when I was only 15 yards away, I saw a small window apparently facing me, and I knew from there must be some side to it. Then I found myself almost in the shadow of the structure, dry-throated and timorous from wonder and anxiety. It seemed ordinary enough at close quarters, except that it very white and still. It was monumentous and frightening, the whole. Morning and the whole world seemed to have no purpose at all, save to frame it and give some magnitude and position, so that I could find it with my simple senses, and pretend to myself that I understood it. A constabulary crest above the door told me that it was a police station. I had never seen a police station like it. I cannot say why I did not stop to think, or why my nervousness did not make me halt and sit down weakly by the roadside. Instead, I walked straight up to the door and looked in. I saw, standing with his back to me, an enormous policeman. His back appearance was unusual. He was standing behind a little counter in a neat whitewashed day room. His mouth was open, and he was looking into a mirror which hung upon the wall. Again, I find it difficult to convey the precise reason why my eyes found his shape unprecedented and unfamiliar. He was very big and fat, and the hair which strayed abundantly about the back of his bulging neck was a pale straw color, all that was striking but not unheard of. My glance ran over his great back, his thick arms and legs encased in a rough blue uniform. Ordinary enough as each part of him looked by itself, they all seemed to create together, by some undetectable discrepancy in association or proportion, a very disquieting impression of unnaturalness, amounting almost to what was horrible and monstrous. His hands were red, swollen, and enormous, and he appeared to have one of them halfway into his mouth as he gazed into the mirror. "It's my teeth," I heard him say, abstractedly and half aloud. His voice was heavy and slightly muffled, reminding me of a thick winter quilt. I must have made some sound at the door, or possibly had seen my reflection in the glass, for he turned slowly round, shifting his stance with leisurely and heavy majesty, his fingers still working at his teeth, and as he turned I heard him murmuring to himself, "Nearly every sickness is from the teeth." His face gave me one more surprise. It was enormously fat, red and white spread, sitting squarely on the neck of his tunic with a clumsy weightiness that reminded me of a sack of flour. The lower half of it was hidden by a violent red mustache which shot out from his skin far into the air like the antenna of some unusual animal. His cheeks were red and chubby, and his eyes were near invisible, hidden from above by the obstruction of his tufted brows, and from below by the flat foldings of his skin. He came over ponderously to the inside of the counter, and I advanced meekly from the door until we were face to face. "Is it about a bicycle?" he asked. His expression when I encountered it was unexpectedly reassuring. His face was gross and far from beautiful, but he had modified and assembled his various unpleasant features in some skilful way so that they expressed to me good nature, politeness, and infinite patience. In the front of his peaked official cap was an important-looking badge, and over it in gold letters was the word "Sergeant." It was Sergeant Pluck himself. "No," I answered, stretching forth my hand to lean with it against the counter. Sergeant looked at me incredulously. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Certain. Not about a motorcycle?" "No." "One with overhead valves and dynamo for light? Or with racing handlebars?" "No." In that circumstantial eventuality there can be no question of a motor bicycle. He looked surprised and puzzled, and leaned sideways on the counter on the prop of his left elbow, putting the knuckles of his right hand behind his yellow teeth, and raising three enormous wrinkles of perplexity on his forehead. I decided now that he was a simple man, and that I would have no difficulty in dealing with him exactly as I desired, and finding out from him what had happened to the black box. I did not understand clearly the reason for his questions about bicycles, but I made up my mind to answer everything carefully, to bide my time, and to be cunning in all my dealings with him. He moved away abstractedly, came back, and handed me a bundle of different colored papers, which looked like application forms for bull licenses and dog licenses and the like. It would be no harm if you filled up these forms. Tell me, would it be true that you were an itinerant dentist and that you came on a tricycle? It would not. On a patent tandem? No. Dentists are an unpredictable coterie of people, he said. I do not, I said evenly. He gave me a long searching look, as if to see whether I was serious in what I was saying, again wrinkling up his brow. Then maybe you're no dentist at all, but only a man after a dog license or papers for a bull. I did not say I was a dentist, and I did not say anything about a bull. The sergeant looked at me incredulously. "That is a great curiosity," he said. "A very difficult piece. I puzzled him. A snorter." He sat down by a turf fire and began jawing his knuckles and giving me sharp glances from under his bushy brows. If I had horns upon my head or a tail behind me, he could not have looked at me with more interest. I was unwilling to give any lead to the direction of the talk, and there was complete silence for 5 minutes. Then his expression eased a bit, and he spoke to me again. "What is your pronoun?" he inquired. "I have no pronoun," I answered, hoping I knew his. "What is your cog?" "My cog?" "Your surname." "I have not got that either." My reply again surprised him, and also seemed to please him. He raised his thick eyebrows and changed his face into what could be described as a smile. He came back to the counter, put out his enormous hand, took mine in it, and shook it warmly. "No name or no idea of your originality at all?" "None." "Well, by holy crikey!" "Senor Ben, the eminent one-legged tenor." "By the holy Irish American powers," he said again. "By the dad! Well, carry me back to old Kentucky." He then retreated from the counter to his chair by the fire, and sat silently bent in thought, as if examining one by one the bygone years stored up in his memory. "I was once acquainted with a tall man," he said to me at last, "that had no name either, and you are certain to be his son and the heir to his nullity and all his nothings. What way is your pop today, and where is he?" It was not, I thought, entirely unreasonable that the son of a man who had no name should have no name also, but it was clear that the sergeant was confusing me with someone else. This was no harm, and I decided to encourage him. I considered it desirable that he should know nothing about me, but it was even better if he knew several things which were quite wrong. It would help me in using him for my own purposes and ultimately in finding the black box. "He's gone to America," I replied. "Is that where?" said the sergeant. "Do you tell me that? He's a true family husband. Last time I interviewed him he was about a missing pump, and he had a wife and 10 sonnies, and at that time had a wife again in a very advanced state of sexuality." "That was me," I said, smiling. "That was you," he agreed. What way are the 10 strong sons?" "All gone to America." "That's a great conundrum of a country," said the sergeant. "A very wide territory, a place occupied by black men and strangers. Told they're very fond of shooting matches in that quarter. It is a queer land." At this stage there were footsteps at the door, and in marching a heavy policeman carrying a small consigliere lamp. He had a dark Jewish face and hooky nose and masses of black curly hair. He was blue-jowled and black-jowled, and looked as if he shaved twice a day. He had white enamelled teeth, which came, I had no doubt, from Manchester, 2 rows of them arranged in the interior of his mouth, and when he smiled it was a fine sight to see, like delf on a neat country dresser. He was heavy-fleshed and gross in body, like the sergeant, but his face looked far more intelligent. It was unexpectedly lean, and the eyes in it were penetrating and observant. If his face alone were in question, he would look more like a poet than a policeman, but the rest of his body looked anything but poetical. "Policeman McCruskey," said Sergeant Pluck. Policeman McCruskey put the lamp on the table, shook hands with me, and gave me the time of day with great gravity. His voice was high, almost feminine, and he spoke with a delicate, careful intonation. Then he put the little lamp on the counter, surveying the two of us. "Is it about a bicycle?" "Not that," said the sergeant. "This is a private visitor who says he did not arrive in townland upon a bicycle. He has no personal name at all. His data is from Fur America." "Which is the two Americas?" said Mac McCruskey. "Unified Stations. Likely he's rich by now if he's in that quarter. Because there's dollars there. Dollars of bucks and mucks in the ground, and any amount of rackets of golf games and musical instruments. It's a free country, too, by all accounts. Free for all. Tell me this," he said to the policeman. "Do you take any readings today?" "I did." "Take out your black book and tell me what it was. Like a good man. Give me the gist of it all till I see what I see." McCruskey fished a small black notebook from his breast pocket. 10.6. 10.6. And what reading did you notice on the beam? 7.4. How much on the lever? 1.5. There was a pause here. The sergeant put on an expression of great intricacy, as if he was doing far from simple sums and calculations in his head. After a time his face cleared, and he spoke again to his companion. "Was there a fall? A heavy fall at past 3. "Very understandable and commendably satisfactory," said the sergeant. "Your supper's on the hob inside, and be sure to stir them up before you take any. The way the rest of us after you will have our share of the fats of it, the health and heart of it." Policeman McCroyskin smiled at the mention of food, and went into the back room, loosening his belt as he went. After a moment we heard the sounds of coarse slobbering, as if he was eating porridge without the assistance of a spoon or hand. The sergeant invited me to sit at the fire in his company, and gave me a wrinkled cigarette from his pocket. "It's lucky for your pop that he's situated in a murky," he remarked, as if a thing that he's having trouble with the old teeth. "Very few sicknesses that are not from the teeth." "Yes," I said. I was determined to say as little as possible, and let these unusual policemen first show their hand. Then I would know how to deal with them. "As a man can have more disease and germination in his gob than you'd find in a rat's coat, and Murky's a country where the population do grand teeth like shaving leather or bits of delf when you break a plate." "Quite true," I said. "Or like eggs under a black crow." "Like eggs. Did you ever happen upon the cinematograph in your travels?" "No," I answered humbly, "but I believe it's a dark quarter and little can be seen at all except the photographs on the wall." "Well, it is there where you see the fine teeth they do have in America," said the sergeant. He gave the fire a hard look, and took to handling it absently with his yellow stumps of teeth. "I've been wondering about his mysterious conversation with Krusky." "Tell me this much," I ventured. "What sort of readings were those in the policeman's black book?" The sergeant gave me a keen look, which felt almost hot from being on fire previously. "First beginnings of wisdom," he said, "is to ask questions, but never to answer any. You get wisdom from asking, and from not answering. Would you believe that there is a great interest in crime in this locality? Last year we had 69 cases of no lights and 4 stolen. This year we have 82 cases of no lights, 13 cases of riding on the footpath, and 4 stolen. There was 1 case of wanton damage to the 3-speed gear. There's sure to be claim on the next court, and an area's charge will be the parish. Before the year is out, there's certain to be a pump stolen, a very depraved and despicable manifestation of criminality, and a blot on the country." "Indeed," I said. 5 years ago we had a case of loose handlebars. Now there's a rarity for you. Took the 3 of us a week to frame the charge." "Loose handlebars," I muttered. Could not clearly see the reason for such talk about bicycles. "Then there's a question of bad brakes. Country is honeycombed with bad brakes. Half the accidents are due to it, and runs in the families." I thought it'd be better to try to change the conversation from bicycles. "You told me what the first rule of wisdom is," I said. "What's the second rule?" That can be answered," he said. "There are 5 in all. Always ask any questions that are to be asked, and never answer any. Turn everything that you hear to your own advantage. Always carry a repair outfit. Take left turns as much as possible. Never apply your front brake first. These are interesting rules, I said dryly. If you follow them, you will save your soul and you will never fall on a slippery road. I would oblige to you, I said, if you would complain to me which of these rules covers the difficulty in which I have come here today to put before you. This is not today, this is yesterday. But which of the difficulties is it? Where is the crux, Roy? Yesterday, I said without any hesitation, that it was a waste of time trying to understand a half of what he said. I persevered with my inquiry. Came here to inform you officially about the theft of my American gold watch. He looked at me through an atmosphere of great surprise and incredulity and raised his eyebrows almost to his hair. That's an astonishing statement, he said at last. Why? Why should anybody steal a watch when they could steal a bicycle? Hark to his cold, inexorable logic. Search me, I said. Have you ever heard of a man riding a watch down the road, or bringing a sack of turf up to his house on the cross beam bar of his watch? I did not say the thief wanted my watch to ride it, I expostulated. Very likely he had a bicycle of his own, and that's how he got away quiet in the middle of the night. Never in my puff did I hear any man stealing anything but a bicycle when he was in his same senses, said the sergeant, except pumps and clips and lamps and the like of that. Surely you're not going to tell me at any time of the life that the world is changing. I'm only saying that my watch was stolen, I said crossly. Very well, said the sergeant with his finality. We will have and institute a search. He smiled brightly at me. It was quite clear that he did not believe any part of my story, and that he thought I was a delicate mental case. He was hearing me as if I were a child. Thank you, I muttered. The trouble will only be beginning when we find it, he said severely. How's that? When we find it, we'll have to start searching for the owner. But I am the owner. Here the sergeant laughed indulgently and shook his head. I know what you mean, but the law is an extremely intricate phenomenon. If you have no name, you cannot own a watch, and the watch that has been stolen does not exist, and when it's found, it will have to be restored to its rightful owner. If you have no name, you possess something that did not exist. Even your trousers are not on you, although they look as if they were from you where I am sitting. On the other hand, you can do what you like, and the law cannot touch you. I had 15 jewels, I said despairingly. And on the first hand again, you might be charged with theft or common larceny if you were mistaken for somebody else when wearing the watch. I feel extremely puzzled, I said, speaking nothing less than the truth. The sergeant gave his laugh of good humor. If we ever find the watch, I have a feeling that there will be a bell and pump on it. I had considered my position with some misgiving. It seemed to be impossible to make the sergeant take cognizance of anything in the world except bicycles. I thought I would make a last effort. You appear to be under the impression, I said coldly and courteously, that I have lost the golden bicycle of American manufacturers for 15 jewels. I have lost a watch, and there is no bell on it. Bells are only on alarm clocks, and I have never in my life seen a watch with a pump attached to it. There was a man in this room a fortnight ago, he said, telling me that he was at the loss of his mother, a lady of 82. When I asked her for a description, just to fill up the blanks in official form we get for half nothing from the stationery office, he said she had rust on her rims and that her back brakes were subject to the jerks. His speech made my position quite clear to me. When I was about to say something else, a man put his face in and looked at us and then came in completely and shut the door carefully and came over to the counter. He was a bluff red man in a burly coat with twine binding his trousers at the knee. I discovered afterwards that his name was Michael Gilhani. Instead of standing at the counter as he would in a public house, he went to the wall, put his arms akimbo, and leaned against it, balancing his weight on the point of one elbow. Well, Michael, said the sergeant pleasantly. That is a cold one, said Mr. Hanny. Sounds of shouting came to the three of us from the inner room where Policeman Rakuski was engaged in his task of his early dinner. Hand me a smoke, he called. The sergeant gave me another wrinkled cigarette from his pocket and jerked his thumb in the direction of the back room. As I went in with the cigarette, I heard the sergeant open an enormous ledger and put questions to the red-faced visitor. What does it make? He was saying, and the number of the frame, and was there a lamp and a pump on it into the same bargain? 5. The long and unprecedented conversations I had with Policeman Rakuski after I went in to him on my mission with a cigarette brought to my mind afterwards several more delicate speculations into Selby, notably his investigation of the nature of time and eternity by a system of mirrors. His theory, as I understand it, is as follows. The man stands before a mirror and sees it in his reflection. What he sees is not a true reproduction of himself, but a picture of himself when he was a younger man. De Selby's explanation of this phenomenon is quite simple. Light, as he points out truly enough, has an ascertained and finite rate of travel. Hence, before the reflection of any object in a mirror can be said to be accomplished, it needs to be it's necessary that rays of light should first strike the object and subsequently impinging on the glass to be thrown back again to the object, to the eyes of the man, for instance. Ugh. There is therefore an appreciable and calculable interval of time between the throwing by a man of a glance of his own face in a mirror and the registration of the reflected image in his eye. So far, one may say, so good. Whether this idea is right or wrong, the amount of time involved is so negligible that few reasonable people would argue the point. But De Selby, of course, probably comes up with some long crap, ever loath to leave well enough alone, of course, insists on reflecting the first reflection in a further mirror and professing to detect minute changes in the second image. Ultimately, he constructed a familiar arrangement of parallel mirrors, each reflecting diminishing images of an interposed object indefinitely. The interposed object in this case was De Selby's own face, and this he claims to have studied backwards through an infinity of reflections by means of a powerful glass. What he states to have seen through his glass is astonishing, and claims to have noticed a growing youthfulness in the reflection of his face according as they receded. The most distant of them, too tiny to be visible to the naked eye, being the face of a beardless boy of 12, and to use his own words, a countenance of singular beauty and nobility. He did not succeed in pursuing the matter back to the cradle, owing to the curvature of the earth and limitations of the telescope. So much for De Selby. I found McCruskeen with a red face at the kitchen table, panting quietly from all the food he had hidden in his belly. In exchange for the cigarette, he gave me searched looks. Well, now. He lit the cigarette and sucked at it and smiled covertly at me. Well, now, he said again. He had his little lamp beside him on the table and played his fingers on it. That is a fine day, I said. What do you do with the lamp in the white morning? I can give you a question as good as that, he responded. Can you notify me of the meaning of bulbul? A bulbul? What would you say a bulbul is? This conundrum did not interest me, but I pretended to rack my brain and screw my face in perplexity until I felt it half the size it should be. Not one of those ladies who take money, I said. No. Not the brass knobs on a German steam organ? Not the knobs. Nothing to do with independence of America or such like. No. A mechanical engine for winding clocks? No. A tumor or lather in a cow's mouth, or those elastic articles that ladies wear? Not them by a long chalk. Not an Eastern musical instrument played by Arabs. He clapped his hands. Not that, but very near it. Something next door to it. You're a cordially intelligent man. The bulbul is a Persian nightingale. What do you think of that now? It is seldom I am far out, I said dryly. He looked at me in admiration, and two of us sat in silence for a while, as if very pleased with himself, and with the other, and had a good reason to be. Good God. I'll set that up here. What the hell? You are a B.A. with little doubt, he questioned. I have no direct answer, but tried to look big, and learning is far from simple in my little chair. I think you're a Sempernial man, he said slowly. He sat for a while, giving the floor a strict examination, and then put his dark jaw over to me and began questioning me about my arrival in the parish. I do not want to be insidious, he said, but would you inform me about your arrival in the parish? Surely you had a three-speed gear for the hills. I had no three-speed gear, I responded rather sharply, and no two-speed gear, and it's also true I had no bicycle, and little or no pump, and if I had a lamp itself, it would not be necessary if I had no bicycle, and there would be no bracket to hang it on. That may be, said McCruskin, but likely you were laughed at on the tricycle. I had neither a bicycle nor a tricycle, and I am not a dentist, I said with severe categorical thoroughness. I do not believe in the penny farthing or the scooter, the velocipede or tandem tourer. McCruskin got white and shaky and gripped my arm and looked at me intensely. "Now, my natural puff," he said at last, in a strained voice, "I have never encountered a more fantastically epilogue or a queerer story. Surely you're a queer, far-fetched man. To my dying night, I will not forget this day, today morning. Do not tell me that you are taking a hand at me. No, I said. Well, great cripes. He got up and brushed his hair with a fat hand back along his skull and looked out the window for a long interval, his eyes popping and dancing and his face like an empty bag with no blood in it. Then he walked around to put the circulation and took a little space from the place he had on the shelf. Put your hand out, he said. I put it out idly enough, and he held the spear at it. He kept putting it near me and nearer. When he had the bright point of it about a half-foot away, I felt the prick and gave a short cry. There was a little bead of my red blood in the middle of my palm. Thank you very much, I said. I felt too surprised to be annoyed with it. That will make you think, he remarked in triumph. Unless I am an old Dutchman by profession and nationality. He put his little spear back on the shelf and looked at me crookedly from a sidewise angle with a certain quantity of what might be called rois-amuse. Maybe you can explain. That, he said, that is the limit, I said wonderingly. It will take some analysis. Yeah, he said intellectually. Why did your spear sting when your point was half a foot away? From, uh-huh, hair tie? But the spear, I insisted. Give me the gist of it like a good man, and I will tell no one. I'll tell you because you're a confidential man, he said, and a man that said something about bicycles that I had never heard before. What you think is the point is not the point at all, but only the beginning of the sharpness. Very wonderful, I said, but I do not understand you. The point is 7 inches long, and it is so sharp and thin that you cannot see it with the old eye. The first half of the sharpness is as thick and strong, but you cannot see it either, because the real sharpness runs into it, and if you saw the one, you could see the other, and maybe you would notice the joint. I suppose it's far thinner than a match, I asked. There is a difference, he said. Now, the proper sharp part is so thin that nobody can see it no matter what light is on it or what eye is looking. About an inch from the end, it is so sharp that sometimes, late at night, on a soft, bad day especially, you cannot think of it or try to make it the subject of a little idea because you will hurt your box with the excruciation of it. I gave a frown and tried to make myself look like a wise person who was trying to comprehend something that called for all his wisdom. You cannot have fire without bricks, I said, nodding. Wisely enough, said, wisely said. It was sharp, sure enough, I conceded. It drew a little bulb of red blood, but it did not feel the pricking hardly at all. Must be very sharp to work like that. The Kurskin gave a laugh and sat down again at the table and started putting on his belt. You have not got the whole gist of it at all, he smiled, because what gave you the prick and brought the blood was not the point at all. It was the place I'm talking about. That is a good inch from the reputed point of the article under our discussion. And what is this inch that is left? What in heaven's name would you call that? That is the real point. But it is so thin that it could go in your hand and out the other extremely externally, and you would not feel a bit of it, and would see nothing or hear nothing. It is so thin that maybe it does not exist at all, and you could spend half an hour trying to think about it, and you could put no thought around it in the end. The biggest part of the inch is thicker than the last part, and is nearly there for a fact, but I don't think it is if my private opinion that you are anxious to enlist. I fastened my fingers around my jaw and started to think with great concentration, calling into play parts of my brain that I rarely use. Nevertheless, I made my progression at all as regards the questions of the points. Now, Kurski had been at the dresser a second time and was back at the table with a little black article like a leprechaun's piano, with diminutive keys of white and black, and brass pipes and circular revolving cogs like part of a steam engine or on the business end of a thrashing mill. His white hands were moving all over it and feeling as if they were trying to discover some tiny lump on it, and his face was looking up in the air in a spiritual attitude, and he was paying no attention to my personal existence at all. There was an overpowering, tremendous silence as if the roof of the room had come down halfway to the floor, he at his queer occupation with the instrument, and myself still trying to comprehend the sharpness of the points and get accurate understanding of them. After 10 minutes he got up and put the thing away. He wrote for a time in his notebook, and then lit his pipe. Well now, he remarked expansively. Those points, I said. Did I happen to ask what a bulbul was? You did, I responded, but the question of those points is what takes me to the fair. It is not today or yesterday I started pointing spears, he said, but maybe you would like to see something else that is a medium, for example, of supreme art. I would indeed, I answered, but I cannot give over what you confided in me privately, the sub rosa, about the no bicycle. That is a story that would make a golden fortune if you wrote it down in a book where people could pursue it literally. He walked back to the dresser and opened the lower part of it and took out a little chest to put on the table for my inspection. Never in my life did I inspect anything more ornamental and well made. It was a round chest like those owned by seafaring men or Lascars from Singapore, but it was diminutive in a very perfect way, as if you were looking at a full-size one through the wrong end of a spyglass. It was about a foot in height, perfect in its proportions, and without fault in workmanship. There were indentions and carvings and fanciful excoriations and designs at every size of it, and there was a bend on the lid that gave the article grand distinction. At every corner there was a shiny brass corner piece. On the lid there was a brass corner pieces beautifully wrought and curved impeccably against the wood. The whole thing had dignity and satisfying quality of true art. "There now," said McCruskeen. "It is nearly too nice," I said at last, "to talk about it." "I spent 2 years manufacturing it when I was a lad," said McCruskeen, "and it takes me to the fair." "It is unmentionable," I said. "Very nearly," said McCruskeen. The two of us started looking at it, and we looked at it for 5 minutes so hard it seemed to dance on the table and look even smaller than it might be. "I do not often look at the boxes or chests," I said, simply, "but this is the most beautiful box I have ever seen, and will always remember it. There might be something inside it." "There might be," said McCluskey. He went to the table and put his hands around the article in a fawning way as if he were caressing a sheepdog, and he opened the lid with a little key, but shut it down again before I could inspect the inside of it. "I will tell you a story and give you a synopsis of the ramification of the little plot," he said. "When I had the chest made and finished, I tried to think what would what would I keep in it, and what would I use it for at all. First I thought of them letters from Brady, the ones with the blue paper with a strong smell, but I did not think it would be anything but sacrilege in the end, because that was hot bits in them letters. Do you comprehend the trend of my observations?" "I do," I answered. Then there was my studs and the enamel badge, and my devouring to speak his own language. He went to the little chest and opened it up again, and put his hand down sideways like flat plates, or like the fins on a fish, and took it out a smaller chest, one resembling its mother chest in every particular of appearance and dimension. It almost interfered with my breathing, it was so delightfully unmistakable. I went over and felt it and covered it with my hand to see how big and smallness it was. Its brasswork had shone like the sun on the sea, and the color of the wood reached richness, a color deepened and toned but only by the years. I got slightly weak from looking at it, and sat down on a chair for the purpose of pretending that I was not disturbed. I whistled "The Old Man Twangs His Braces." McCruskeen gave me a smooth, inhuman smile. "You may have come on no bicycle," he said, "but that does not say that you know everything." "Those chests," I said, "are so like one another that I do not believe they are there at all, because that was a simpler thing to believe than the contrary. Nevertheless, two of them are the most wonderful things I have ever seen." "I was 2 years manufacturing it," McCruskeen said. "What's in the little one?" I asked. "What would you think now?" "I'm completely half afraid to think," I said, speaking truly enough. "Wait now till I show you, and give you an expedition and personal inspection individually." He got two butter spades from the shelf and put them down into the little chest, and pulled out something that seemed to me remarkably like another chest. I went over to it and gave it a close examination of my hand, feeling the same identical wrinkles, the same proportions, and the same completely perfect brasswork on a smaller scale. It was so faultless and delightful that it reminded me forcibly, strange and foolish as it may seem, of something I did not understand and had never even heard of. "Say nothing," I said quickly to Markuski, "but go ahead with what you're doing, and I'll watch here and will take care from the sitting down." He gave me a nod in exchange for my remark, and got two strange handled teaspoons and put the littles into his last chest. What came out may well be guessed at. He opined that this one, and took another one out with the assistance of the two knives. Work knives, smaller knives, till he had 12 little chests on the table, lost them an article half the size of a matchbox. It was so tiny that you would not quite see the brasswork at all, only for the glitter of it in the light. I did not see whether it had the same identical carvings upon it, because I was content to take a swift look at it and then turn away. But I knew in my soul that it was exactly the same as the others. I said no word on that. I said no word at all, because my mind was brimming with wonder at the skill of the policeman. "That last one," McCruskey said, putting away the knives, "took me 3 years to make. It took me another year to believe that it had made. Have you got me the convenience of a pen?" I gave him my pen in silence. He opened the smallest of them, and all with a key like a piece of hair, and worked with due the pin until he had another little chest on the table, 13 in all, arranged in a row upon the table. Queerly enough, they looked to me as if they were all the same size, but invested with some crazy perspective. This idea surprised me so much that I got my voice back and said, "These are the most surprising 13 things I have ever seen together." "Wait now, man," McCruskey said. All my senses were now strained so intently, watching the policeman's movement, that I could almost hear my brain rattling in my head when I gave a shake as if I was drying up into a wrinkled pea. He was manipulating and prodding with his pen till he had 28 little chests on the table, and the last of them so small it looked like a bug or a tiny piece of dirt, except there was glitter from it. When I looked at it again, I saw another thing beside it, like something you would take out of a red eye on a windy, dry day, and knew there'd be strict computation. It was then 29. "Here is your pen," said McCruskey. He put it in my stupid hand and went back to the table thoughtfully. He took something from his pocket that was too small for me to see, started working with the tiny black thing on the table besides the bigger thing, which was itself too small to be described. At this point I became afraid. What he was doing was no longer wonderful, but terrible. I shut my eyes and prayed that he would stop while still doing things that were at least possible for man to do. Then I looked again. I was happy there was nothing to see, and that he had put no more of the chest prominently on the table, but he was working to the left with the invisible thing in his hand on the table itself. When he felt my look, he came over to me and gave me an enormous magnifying glass, which looked like a basin fixed to a handle. I felt the muscles around my heart tighten painfully as I took the instrument. "Come over to the table," he said, "and look until you see what you see infraocularly." When I saw the table, it was bare only for 29 chess articles, but through the agency of the glass, I was in a position to report that he had two more out besides the last ones, the smallest of them all being nearly half a size smaller than ordinary invisibility. I gave him back the glass instrument and took the chair without a word. In order to reassure myself and make a loud human noise, I whistled the corn croak Billy the bagpipes. "There now," said McCruskey. He took two wrinkled cigarettes from his fob and lit the two of them at the same time and handed me one of them. "Number 22, he said. "I manufactured 15 years ago and have made another different one every year since, with any amount of night work and overtime and piecework and time and a half incidentally." "I understand you clearly," I said. "6 years ago they began to get invisible, glass or no glass. Nobody has ever seen the last five I made because no glass is strong enough to make them big enough to be regarded truly as the smallest things ever made. Nobody can see me making them because my little tools are invisible into the same bargain. The one I'm making now is nearly as small as nothing. Number one would hold 1,000,000 of them at the same time, and there would be room left for a pair of women's horse breeches if they were rolled up. The dear knows where it will stop and terminate. Such work must be very hard on the eyes," I said, determined to pretend that everybody was ordinary people like himself. "Okay." With spectacles with gold ear claws. My eyes were crippled with the small print in the newspaper and in the official forms. "Before I go back to the day room," I said, "wouldn't it be right to ask you what you were performing with that little small piano instrument? The article of the knobs and the brass pins?" "That's my personal musical instrument," said McCruskey, "and I was playing my own tunes on it in order to extract private satisfaction from the sweetness of them." "I was listening," I answered, "but I did not succeed in hearing you." "That does not surprise me intuitively," said McCruskey, "because it is an indigenous patent of my own. The vibration of the true notes are so high in their fine frequencies they cannot be appreciated by the human ear. Only myself has the secret of the thing and the intimate way of it, the confidential knack of circumventing it. Now, what do you think of that?" I climbed up to my legs to go back to the day room, passing a hand weakly about my brow. 6. When I penetrated back to the day room, I encountered two gentlemen called Sergeant Pluck and Mr. Gilhaney, and they were holding a meeting about the questions of bicycles. "I do not believe in the three-speed gear at all," the sergeant was saying. "It's a new-fangled instrument. It crucifies the legs. Half of the accidents are due to it." "It is power for the hills," said Gilhaney, "as good as a second pair of pins or a diminutive petrol motor." "It is a hard thing to tune," said the sergeant. "You can screw the iron lace that hangs out of it till you get no catch at all on the pedals. It never stops half the way you want it, but it reminds you of bad jaw plates. That is all lies, said Gilhaney. Or like the pegs of a fairy day fiddle, said the sergeant, or a skinny wife in the craw of a cold bed in the springtime. Not that, said Gilhaney. Or a porter in a sick stomach, said the sergeant. So help me not, said Gilhaney. The sergeant saw me with the corner of his eye and turned to talk to me, taking all his attention away from Gilhaney. McCruskey was giving you his talk, I wouldn't doubt. He was being extremely explanatory, I answered dryly. He's a comical man, said the sergeant, a walking emporium. You'd think he was on wires and worked with steam. He is, I said. He is a melody man, the sergeant added, and very temporary, a menace to the mind. About the bicycle, said Gilhaney. The bicycle will be found, said the sergeant, when I retrieve and restore it to its own owner in due law and possessively. Would you desire to be of assistance in the search? He asked me. I would not mind, I answered. Sergeant looked at his teeth in the glass for a brief intermission, and then put his leggings on his legs and took a hold of his stick as an indication that he was for the road. Gahaney was at the door operating at it to lay us out. Three of us walked in the middle of the day. In case we do not come up with a bicycle before it is high dinner time, said the sergeant, I have left an official memorandum for the personal information of Policeman Fox that he will be acutely conversant with the red as paw. He said. Do you hold with rat-trap pedals? Said Gilhaney. Who is, Fox? I asked. Policeman Fox is the third of us, said the sergeant, but we never see him or hear tell of him at all because he's always on his beat and never off it, and he signs a book in the middle of the night when even a badger is asleep. He is mad as a hare, he never interrogates the public, and he's always taking notes. If rat-trap pedals were universal, it would be the end of bicycles. People would die like flies. What put him that way? I inquired. I never comprehended correctly, replied the sergeant, or got real informative information. The policeman Fox was alone in a private room in McCruskey for a whole hour on a certain 23rd of June, and he's never spoken to anybody since that day, and he's as crazy as a tuppence halfpenny and cranky as threepence. Did I ever tell you how I asked Inspector O'Corky about rat traps? My apologies, why are they not made prohibitive, I said, or made specialties like arsenic, when you would have to buy them at a chemist's shop and sign a little book and look like a responsible personality? They are a power for the hills, said Gilhaney. The sergeant spits on the dry road. You would want special act of parliament, said the inspector, a special act of parliament. What way are we going? I asked, or what direction are we headed for, or are we on the way back from somewhere else? It was a queer country we ran. There was a number of blue mountains around us, what you might call a respectful distance, with a glint of white water coming down the shoulders of one or two of them, and they kept hemming us in and meddling oppressively with our minds. Halfway to these mountains the view got clearer, and was full of humps and hollows and long parks of fine bogland, with civil people here and there in the middle of it, working with long instruments. You could hear their voices calling across the wind and the crack of the dull carts on the roadways. Bright buildings could be seen in several places, and cows shambling lazy from here to there in search of pasture. A company of crows came out of a tree when I was watching, and flew sadly down to a field where there was a quantity of sheep attired in fine overcoats. We are going where we are going, said the sergeant, and this is the right direction to a place that is next door to it. There is one particular thing more dangerous than the rat trap fell. He left the road and drew us in after him through a hedge. It is dishonorable to talk like that about the rat traps, said Gilhaney, because my family has had their boots in them for generations of their own posterity, backwards and forwards, and they all died in their beds except my first cousin that was meddling with the suckers of a steam thrashing mill. There's only one thing more dangerous, said the sergeant, and that is loose plate. Loose plate is a scorcher. Nobody lives very long after swallowing one, and it leads indirectly to asphyxiation. There's no danger of swallowing a rat trap, said Gilhaney. You would want to have good strong clips if you have a plate, said the sergeant, and plenty of red sealing wax to stick it to the roof of your jaws. Take a look at the roots of that bush. It looks suspicious, and there's no necessity for a warrant. It is a small, modest wind bush, a lady member of the tribe, as you might say, with dry particles of hay and sheep's feathers caught in the branches high and low. Gilhaney was on his knees, putting his hands through the grass and rooting like one of the lower animals. After a minute he extracted a black instrument. It was long and thin, and looked like a large fountain pen. My pump, so help me, he shouted. I thought as much, said the sergeant. The finding of the pump is a fortunate clue that may assist us in our mission of private detection and smart police work. Put it in your pocket and hide it, because it's possible that we are watched and followed and dogged by a member of the gang. How'd you know that it was in this particular corner of the world? I asked in my extreme simplicity. What is your attitude to the high saddle? Inquired Gulhaney. Questions are like the knockers of beggarmen and should not be minded, replied the sergeant. But I do not mind telling you that the high saddle is all right if you happen to have a brass fork. A high saddle is a power for the hills, said Gulhaney. We were in an entirely other field by this time, and in company of white-colored, brown-colored cows. They watched us quietly as we made a path between them, and changed their attitude slowly, as if to show us all of the maps on their flat sides. They gave us to understand that they knew us personally and thought a lot of our families, and we lifted my hat to the last of them as I passed her as a sign of my appreciation. The high saddle, said the sergeant, was invented by a party called Peters that spent his life in foreign parts riding on camels and other lofty animals, giraffes, elephants, birds that can run like hares and lay eggs the size of a bull. You see, in a steam laundry where they keep the chemical water for taking the tar out of men's pants. When he came home from the wars, he thought as hard as sitting on a low saddle, and one night accidentally, when he was in bed, he invented the high saddle uh, as the outcome of his perpetual celebration and mental researches. His Christian name I do not remember. The high saddle was the father of the low handlebars. It crucifies the fork and gives you a blood rush in the head. It is very sore on the internal organs. Which of the organs? I inquired. Both of them. I think this would be the tree, said Gulhaney. Would not surprise me, said the sergeant. Put your hands in underneath and start feeling promiscuously the way you ascertain factually if there's anything there in addition to its own nothing. Gulhaney lay down on his stomach on the grass at thy butt of a blackthorn and was inquiring into its private parts with his strong hands and grunting from the stretch of his exertions. After a time he found a bicycle lamp and a bell and stood up and put them secretly in his fob. "It is very satisfactory and complacently articulated," said the sergeant. "Shows the necessity for perseverance, and it is sure to be a clue. We are certain to find the bicycle." "I do not like asking questions," I said politely, "but the wisdom that directed us to this tree is not taught in the national schools." "It's not the first time my bicycle was stolen," said Gulhaney. "In my day," said the sergeant, "half the scholars in the national schools were walking around with enough disease in their gobs to decimate the continent of Russia and wither a field of crops by only looking at them. That is all stopped now. They have compulsory inspections. The middling ones are stuffed with iron, and the bad ones are pulled out with a thing like cloth for cutting wires. Half of it is due to cycling with the mouth open," said Gulhaney. "Nowadays," said the sergeant, "it is nothing strange to see a class of boys at the first book with wholesome teeth and as junior plates manufactured by county council for half nothing. Grinding the teeth halfway up a hill," said Gulhaney. "There's nothing worse. It files away the best part of them and leads to hobnailed liver indirectly." "In Russia," said the sergeant, "they make teeth out of old piano keys for elderly cows, but it is rough inland without too much civilization. It would cost you a fortune in tires." We were now going through the country full of fine enduring trees, where it was always 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a soft corner of the world, free from inquisitions and dispositions, and very soothing and steepening on the mind. There was no animal there that was bigger than a man's thumb, and no noise superior to that which the sergeant was making with his nose, an unusual brand of music like wind in the chimney. To every side of us there was a green growth of soft thorny carpeting with thin green twines coming in and out of it, and coarse bushes putting their heads out here and there, and interrupting the urbanity of the presentation, not pleasing them. The distance we walked in the country I do not know, but we arrived in the end at some place where we stopped without proceeding farther. The sergeant put his finger on a certain part of the growth. "It might be there, and it might not," he said. "We can only try it because perseverance is its own reward, and necessity is the unmarried mother of invention." Delaney was not long at work till he took his bicycle out of that particular part of the growth. He pulled the briars from between the spokes and felt his tires with red-knowing fingers and furbished his machine fastidiously. The three of us walked back again without a particle of conversation to where the road was, and Bilhani put his toe on the pedal to show he was for home. "Before I ride away," he said to the sergeant, "what is your true opinion of the timber rim?" "It is a very commendable invention," the sergeant said. "Gives you more of a bounce, and is extremely easy on your white pneumatics." "The wooden rim," said Beatty slowly, "is a death trap in itself. It swells on a wet day, and I know a man that owes his bad wet death to nothing else." Before we had time to listen carefully to what he was after saying, he was halfway down the road with his fork coat sailing behind him on the sustenance of the wind he was raising by reason of his headlong acceleration. "A droll man," I ventured. "A constituent man," said the sergeant. largely instrumental but volubly fervorous. Walking finally from the hips, the two of us made our way home through the afternoon, impregnating it with the smoke of our cigarettes. I reflected that we'd be sure to have lost our way in the fields and parks of bogland, only that the road very conveniently made its way to advance us back to the barrack. Sergeant was sucking quietly at his stumps and carried a black shadow on his brow as if it were a hat. As he walked, he turned in my direction after a line. The county council has a lot to answer for, he said. I did not understand his meaning, but I said that I agreed with him. There's one puzzle, I remarked, that is hurting the back of my head and causing me a lot of curiosity. It is about the bicycle. I never heard of detective work as good as that being done before. Not only did you find the lost bicycle, but you found all the clues as well. I find it a great strain for me to believe what I see, and I am becoming afraid occasionally to look at some things in case they would not have to be believed. What is the secret of your constabulary virtuosity? He laughed in my earnest inquiries and shook his head with great indulgence at my simplicity. It is a very easy thing, he said. How easy? Even without the clues, I could have succeeded in ultimately finding the bicycle. Seems a very difficult sort of easiness, I answered. Do you know where the bicycle was? I did. How? Because I put it there. You stole the bicycle yourself? Certainly. And the pump and the other clues? I put them where they were finally discovered also. And why? He didn't answer in words for a moment, but kept on walking strongly beside me, looking for far enough ahead as possible. The county council is the culprit, he said at last. I said nothing, knowing that he would blame the county council at greater length if I waited till he had the blame thought out properly. It was not long until he turned in my direction to talk to me again. His face was grave. Did you ever discover or hear tell of the atomic theory? He inquired. No, I answered. He leaned his mouth confidently over to my ear. Would it surprise you to be told, he said darkly, that the atomic theory is at work in this parish? It would indeed. It is doing untold destruction. The half of the people are suffering from it is worse than the smallpox. I thought it better say something. Would it be advisable, I said, that it should be taken in hand by the dispensary doctor or by the national teachers, or do you think it's a matter for the head of the family? Lock, stock, and barrel of it all, said the sergeant, is the county council. He walked on looking worried and preoccupied, as if what he was examining in his head was unpleasant in a very intricate way. The atomic theory, I sallied, is a thing that is not clear to me at all. Michael Gilhaney, said the sergeant, is an example of a man that is nearly van acts from the principle of the atomic theory. Would it astonish you to hear that he is nearly half a bicycle? It would surprise me unconditionally, I said. Michael Gilhaney, said the sergeant, is nearly 60 years of age by plain computation, and if he is in itself, he has spent no less than 35 years riding his bicycle over the rocky roadsteads and up and down the hills and into the deep ditches when the road goes astray in the strain of the winter. He is always going to a particular destination or other on his bicycle at every hour of the day, or coming back from there at every other hour. If it wasn't that his bicycle was stolen every Monday, he'd be sure to have more than halfway now. Halfway to where? Halfway to being a bicycle himself, said the sergeant. Your talk, I said, is certainly the handiwork of wisdom, because not one word of it do I understand. Did you ever study atomics when you were a lad? Asked the sergeant, giving me a great look of inquiry and surprise. No, I answered. That is a very serious defalcation, he said, but all the same I'll tell you the size of it. Everything is composed of small particles of itself, and they are flying around in concentric circles and arcs and segments and innumerable other geometric figures too numerous to mention. Collectively, never standing still or resting but spinning away and darting hither and thither back again, all the time on the go. These diminutive gentlemen are called atoms. Do you follow me intelligently? Yes. They are as lively as 20 leprechauns doing a jig on the top of a tombstone. A very pretty figure, Joe murmured. Now take a sheep, the sergeant said. What is a sheep? Only millions of little bits of sheepness whirled around and doing intricate convolutions inside the sheep. What else is it but that? That'd be bound to make the beast dizzy, I observed, especially if the whirling was going on inside the head as well. Sergeant gave me a look which I was sure he himself would describe as non possum and noli me tangere. That remark is what may be called buncombe, he said sharply, because the nerve strings in the sheep's head itself are whirling in the same bargain, and you can cancel out one whirl against the other, and they are already simplified in the division sum when you have 5 above and below the bar. To say the truth, I did not think of that, I said. Atomics is a very intricate theorem and can be worked out with algebra, but you would want to take it by degrees, because you might spend the whole night proving the bit out with rulers and cosinus and similar other instruments, and then wind up not believe what you had proved at all. If that happened, you'd have to go back over it until you got a place where you could believe your own facts and figures as delineated from Hall and Knight's algebra, and go on again from a particular place until you had the whole thing properly believed, and not have bits of half-believed or a doubt in your head hurting you like when you lose the stud of your shirt in bed. Very true, I said. Consecutively and consequentially, he continued, you can safely infer that you are made of atoms yourself, and so is your fob pocket, and the tail of your shirt, and the instrument you use for taking the leavings out of the crook of your hollow teeth. You happen to know what takes place when you strike a bar of iron with a good coal hammer or with a blunt instrument? What? When the wallet falls, the atoms are dashed away down to the bottom of the bar and compressed and crowded like eggs under a good clucker. After a while, in the course of time, they swim around and get back at last to where they were. If you keep it in the bar long enough and hard enough, they do not get a chance to do this, and what happens then? That is a hard question. Ask a blacksmith for the true answer, and he will tell you that the bar will dissipate itself away by degrees if you persevere with hard wallets. Some of the atoms of the bar will go into the hammer, and the other half will go into the table or stone or particular article that is underneath the bottom of the bar. That is well known, I agree. The gross and net result of it is that people have spent most of their natural lives riding iron bars over the rocky roadsteads of the parish, get their personalities mixed up with the personalities of their bicycle as a result of the interchanging of the atoms of each of them, and you'd be surprised at the number of people in these parts who nearly are half people and half bicycles. I let go a gasp of astonishment that made the sound of air like a bad puncture. And you would be flabbergasted at the number of bicycles that are half human, almost half man, half partaking of humanity. Apparently there's no limit, Joe remarked. Anything can be said in this place and it will be true and will have to be believed. I would not mind being worked this minute on a steamer in the middle of the sea, I said, pulling ropes and doing hard manual work. I would like to be far away from here. I looked carefully around me. Brown bogs and black bogs were arranged neatly on each side of the road, with rectangular boxes carved out of them here and there, each with a filling of yellow water. Far away near the sky, tiny people were stooped at their turf work, cutting out precisely shaped sods with their patent spades and building them into a tall memorial twice the height of a horse and cart. Sounds came from them to the sergeant and myself, delivered to our ears without charge by the west wind, sounds of laughing and whistling and bits of verses from the old bog songs. Nearer, a house stood attended by 3 trees and surrounded by the happiness of coterie of fowls, all of them picking and rooting and disputating loudly in the unrelenting manufacture of their eggs. The house was quiet in itself and silent, but a canopy of lazy smoke had been erected over the chimney to indicate that people were within engaged on tasks. Ahead of us went the road, running swiftly across the flat land, and pausing slightly to climb slowly up a hill that was waiting for it in a place where the tall grass, gray boulders, and rank, stunted trees. The whole overhead was occupied by the sky, serene, impenetrable, ineffable, and incomparable, with a fine island of clouds anchored in the calm 2 yards to the right of Mr. Johnson's outhouse. The scene was real and incontrovertible, and at variance with the talk of the sergeant. But I knew that the sergeant was talking the truth, and if it was a question of taking my choice, it was possible that I would have to forego the reality of all the simple things my eyes were looking at. I took a sideways view of them. He was striding on with signs of anger against the county council on his colored face. Are you certain about the humanity of the bicycle? I inquired of him. Is the atomic theory as dangerous as you say? It is between twice and 3 times as dangerous as it might be, he replied gloomily. Early in the morning I often think it is 4 times, and what is more, if you lived there for a few days and gave full play to your observation and inspection, you would know how certain the sureness of certainty is. Yohani did not look like a bicycle, I said. He had no back wheel on him, and I did not think he had a front wheel either, although I did not give much attention to his front. The sergeant looked at me with some commiseration. You can't expect him to go handlebars at his neck, but I have seen him do indescribable things than that. Did you ever notice the queer behavior of bicycles in these parts? I'm not long in this district. Thanks be, said Joe. Then watch the bicycles if you think it's pleasant to be surprised continuously, he said. When a man lets things go so far that he's half or more than half a bicycle, you will not see so much because he spends a lot of his time leaning with one elbow on walls or standing propped by one foot or a curbstone. Of course, there are other things connected with ladies and ladies' bicycles that I will mention to you separately sometime, But the man charged bicycles, a phenomenon of great charm and intensity, in a very dangerous article. At this point, a man with long coat-tails spread behind him approached quickly on a bicycle, coasting benignly down the road past us from the hill ahead. I watched him with the eye of six eagles, trying to find out which was carrying the other and whether it was really a man with a bicycle on his shoulders. I did not seem to see anything, however, that was memorable or remarkable. The sergeant was looking in his black notebook. "That was O'Fierce," he said at last. "His figure is only 23%. He's 23% bicycle?" "Yes." "Does that mean his bicycle is also 23% O'Fierce?" "It does." "How much is Gilzani?" 48. Then O'Fierce is much lower. That is due to the lucky fact that there's three similar blooders in the house, and they're too poor to have a separate bicycle apiece. Some people never know how fortunate they are when they are poorer than each other. 6 years ago, one of the three O'Fierces won a prize of 10 pounds in John Bull. When I got wind of this tiding, I knew I would have to take steps unless there was to be two new bicycles in the family, because you will understand that I can steal only a limited number of bicycles in the 1 week. I do not want to have three O'Fierces on my hands. Luckily, I knew the postman very well. The postman, great holy suffering, india-rubber bowels of brown stirabout. The recollection of the postman seemed to give the sergeant a pretext for unlimited amusement and cause for intricate gesturing with his red hands. "The postman?" I said. 71%, he said quietly. "Great Scott! Ran at 38 miles on the bicycle every single day for 40 years. Hail, rain, or snowballs. There's very little hope of ever getting his number down below 50 again." "You bribed him?" "Certainly, with two of the little straps you put around your hubs of bicycles to keep 'em spick." "In what way do these people's bicycles behave?" "These people's bicycles?" "I mean these bicycles people, or whatever is the proper name for 'em. Ones that have two wheels on them, and handlebars. The behavior of bicycles is that he has a high content of humanity. It is very cunning and entirely remarkable. You never see them moving by themselves, but you meet them in the least accountable places unexpectedly. Did you ever see a bicycle leaning against the dresser of a warm kitchen when it's pouring outside?" "I did." "Not very far away from the fire?" "Yes." "Near enough to the family to hear the conversation?" "Yes." "Not 1,000 miles from where they keep the eatables?" "I did not notice that. You did not mean to say that they were never seen doing it. Nobody ever caught them with a mouthful of steak. All I know is that the food disappears." "What?" "It's not the first time I have noticed crumbs at the front wheels of some of these gentlemen." "All this is a great blow to me," I said. "Nobody takes any notice," replied the sergeant. "Mick thinks that Pat brought it in, and Pat thinks that Mick was instrumental. Very few of the people guess what is going on in the parish. There are other things I would rather not say too much about. A new lady teacher was here one time with a new bicycle. She was not very long here till Gilhaney went away into the lonely country on her female bicycle. Can you appreciate the immorality of that?" "I can." "The worst happened. Whatever way Gilhaney's bicycle managed it, it left itself leaning at a place where the young teacher would rush out to go anyway somewhere on her tricycle in a hurry. Her bike was gone, but here was Gilhaney's leaning there conveniently and trying to look very small and comfortable and attractive. Need I inform you what the result was or what happened?" "Indeed he not," Joe said urgently. "I have never heard of anything so shameless and abandoned." Of course the teacher was blameless. She did not take pleasure and did not know. "You need not," I said. "Well, there you are. Gilhaney's a day out with the lady's bicycle, and vice versa contrarily, and it's quite clear that the lady in this case had a high number, 35 or 40, I would say, in spite of the newness of the bicycle. Many a gray hair it has put in my head, trying to regulate the people of this parish. If you let it go too far, it would be the end of everything. You would have bicycles wanting votes, and they would get seats on the county council, and make the roads far worse than they are for their own ulterior motives. But again, that, and on the other hand, your bicycle is a great companion. There's great charm about it. How did you know about a man has a lot of bicycle in his veins? If his number is over 50, you can tell it unmistakable from his walk. He will walk smartly always and never sit down, and he will lean against the wall with his elbow out and stay out like that all night in his kitchen instead of going to bed. If he walks too slowly or stops in the middle of the road, he will fall down in a heap and will have to be lifted and set in motion again by some extraneous party. This is the unfortunate state that the postman has cycled himself into, and I do not think he'll ever cycle himself out of it." "I do not think I'll ever ride a bicycle," I said. "A little of it's a good thing. It makes you hardy and puts irons on to you. But walking too far often gets quickly is not safe at all. The continual cracking of your feet on the road makes a certain quantity of the road come up into you. When a man dies, they say he returns to the clay, but too much walking fills you up with clay far sooner, or buries bits of you along the road and brings you death halfway halfway to meet you. It is not easy to know what is the best way to move yourself from one place to another. After he had finished speaking, I found myself walking nimbly and lightly on my toes in order to prolong my life. My head was packed tight with fears and miscellaneous apprehensions. I never heard of these things before, I said, and never knew these happenings could happen. Is it a new development, or was it always an ancient fundamental? Sergeant's face clouded, and he spat thoughtfully 3 yards ahead of him on the road. I'll tell you a secret, he said very confidentially in a low voice. My great-grandfather was 83 when he died. For a year before his death, he was a horse. A horse? Horse in everything but extraneous externalities. He would spend the day grazing in a field or eating hay in a stall. Usually he was lazy and quiet, but now and again he would go for a smart gallop, clearing the hedges in great style. Did you ever see a man two glades galloping? I did not. Well, I am given to understand it's a great sight. He always said he won the Great National when he was a lot younger, and he used to annoy his family with stories about the incorrect jumps and the great height of them. I suppose your great-grandfather got himself in this condition by too much horse riding. That was the size of it. His old horse Dan was in the contrary way and gave so much trouble, coming into the house at night and interfering with young girls during the day and committing indictable offenses, that they had to they had to shoot him. The police were unsympathetic, not comprehending things rightly in these days. They said they would have to arrest the horse and charge him and have him up at the next petty sessions unless he was done away with. So my family shot him, but if you ask me, it was my great-grandfather they shot, and it's the horse they buried up in Kilclona churchyard. The sergeant then became thoughtful at the recollection of his ancestors and had a reminiscent face for the next half-mile till we came to the barracks. Joe and I agreed privately that these revelations were the supreme surprise stored for us and awaiting on our arrival in the barracks. When we reached it, the sergeant led the way in with a sigh. The lock, stock, and barrel of it all, he said, is the county council. And so the policemen weaved their web of nonsense. Were bicycles still souls and inventions nest forever? O'Brien's genius bends the mind like a pretzel. What further absurdities await in the next chapters? Stay tuned if your sanity can handle the spin.